Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. I'd like to talk about American presidents, and at the same time, I've been doing videos to draw upon color of law violations uh, through deprivation of rights. That's uh, 18 USC sections 241 and 242, and malicious prosecution 42 USC section 1983, which is being superintended by the judicial misconduct of Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County Circuit Court in Maryland. Uh, you know, as I talk about American presidents, what I've tried to do is to show how our laws, our history, through American presidents, how they intertwined, right? And bring out how our, the liberties and freedoms we enjoy and the institutions we enjoy today, how they've been shaped by how our presidents have engaged, with, um, you know, with with these institutions, or designed them, helped to fashion them. Um, when I'm talking about the judicial misconduct of Judge James Bonifant and public corruption in Maryland, you know, um, I want to emphasize how it is anathema to our founding principles in the Declaration, from the very Declaration of Independence, which our third president, Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't president at the time, but he was author of the Declaration of Independence. One of the grievances that he cited was how the King of England had obstructed the administration of justice, right, and set up mock trials and things like that. So he was talking about the injustice and the abuse of, lack of due process, right? And so these things regarding due process, fairness, and the rights of accused were now enshrined in the Bill of Rights by James Madison, who would become our fourth president. And of course, he was a protege of Thomas Jefferson. These two men, Virginia men, and it's ironic that Judge James Bonifant, I don't know if he thinks he's King James Bonifant. It's ironic that he graduated from University of Virginia, but he was raised, it seems, from Montgomery County, Maryland. It says, right. So he's a judge in Maryland, but he graduated from University of Virginia, which was actually established. The founder was Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison also did a lot, to endow and benefit that institution. James Madison was a great Virginian as well. So the actions of Judge James Bonifant, the corrupt practices, the abusive process, they're an abomination to these principles, the principles of these founding fathers. And let me not just be, I'm not, it's not my job to slander. I'm not slandering Judge James Bonifant or anything. He's a public figure, but what I'm stating is facts and how he's falsified. For instance, he falsified records, court records, in order to engineer a wrongful involuntary commitment. And he did that more than once to me. I have a case. It's a malicious prosecution. It's a bad faith case, against me. But if I'm accused of something, I have a right to my day in court and to face my accusers. But Judge Bonifant has actually obstructed this it's a 3 years now. He's obstructed this process for the past 3 years. Today, let me talk specifically in how he maliciously falsified records in order to wrongfully uh, commit me at a mental hospital to do a competency evaluation. He was hoping that they would be able to diagnose me with a mental illness and force nostrums on me. I was very fortunate that, well, these medical doctors, these psychiatrists, they they didn't bend the knee to Judge Bonifant, and they didn't subscribe to his malicious and corrupt misconduct. So, specifically, Judge Bonifant on November 13, um, um, 2024, had ordered me to attend a pretrial violation, right? Because when when he'd found me competent on July 31, 2024, after the hospital he had wrongfully involuntary committed me to again previously, their psychiatrist, the forensic psychiatrist, Dr. Martin Brandis, told him in court that one, I have no mental illness. There's no diagnosis for a mental illness. And in fact, he was certain I had no mental illness. Judge Bonifant had initially falsified records and defamed me, saying I had bipolar disorder and sent me there, right? Under Maryland law, only people who have a mental illness or retardation, right, can be committed to a psychiatric hospital. So Judge Bonifant will falsify records, right? Sometimes he will use, they have a system in Montgomery County Circuit where they have, at least Judge Bonifant does. I don't know what other judges do, but Judge Bonifant has his racket because he's on the board of directors of a hospital, MedStar Hospital, which I have a malpractice complaint against, right? He has these psychologists, state psychologists like Dr. Julie Smith, that in which he conspires to falsify, fabricate medical records, right? To engineer wrongful involuntary commitments, right? So I'm going to talk about that in a later video, but I'm going to focus on this particular instance of November 13, 2024. So on July 31st, 2024, Dr. Martin Brandis of Eastern Shore Hospital Center had told him that, no, I don't have a mental illness, and I can have onset bipolar disorder, that they didn't see any signs of it in me, that I was with them for 3 months. They didn't see anything, because he falsified evidence, right? Symptoms. That's Judge Bonifant. Him and his quack doctor, Dr. Julie Smith, state psychologist, right, for Montgomery County, Maryland. They falsify records, right? And so, but Dr. Martin Brandis is an old white man as well, contended with him via Zoom, said no, that whatever anybody saw, that maybe was something else. He gave other reasons, right? But first of all, nobody's asked me if I ever manifested these symptoms, but they were fabrications. They were falsified. Of course, they all stemmed originally from Jide Warir's fabricated emergency evaluation petition. Everything he wrote was a fabrication. He's not my uncle, and everything he wrote was a lie, right? And he's since disavowed it. And my mom has gone to court in Nigeria stating that everything he wrote was a fabrication. My aunt is a psychiatrist in Maryland. She said it's a lie. My friends, people, family, they've all come out, told the court that's a fabrication. So Judge Bonifant had falsified his own records with Dr. Julie Smith and a guy called Dr. Michael Mintz, right? I'm going to do another video and talk about how he co-opts and coerces attorney misconduct through the public defender's office, right? To sabotage indigent defendants in Montgomery County, Maryland, okay? So Dr. Martin Brandis had told him that I don't have a mental illness, and they couldn't give me any medication because I didn't have any mental illness. So, fuming, Judge Bonifant first tried to convince me, blah, blah, blah. I said, no. He talked about me being very strong-willed, blah, blah, blah. So, he was doing something violating my constitutional rights. He was just trying to coerce me to accept a mental illness I don't have, to take medication. He had his purpose. And I said, no, that's not going to happen, right? His objective was to obstruct justice, because once you can establish a mental illness or something like that, that was undiagnosed, then the police officers who violated me, who committed misconduct, right, violated my constitutional rights, my Fourth Amendment and 14th Amendment rights, it gives them some kind of advantage, or credibility in courts. They're lies, because they'll just dispute what it is that I'm saying, because they'll say, well, but this guy had a mental illness that was undiagnosed, so you can't believe him, because they've destroyed evidence, right? They surrounded me. They had already um, they evacuated the building, and then they just sort of like ambushed me, right? Locked me up. And so anything, uh, uh, I'm sort of like my own witness. I'm the one who experienced the situation. So, but they have their own fabricated narrative. Of course, they did all of this. Uh, I'm going to do another video to expound on, but let me just focus on this particular point. So uh, Judge, Dr. Martin Brandis told him, absolutely, I have no mental illness. Uh, you know, they didn't say anything. He specifically said, if there were any mental illness that I had, they would have seen it. They didn't see anything. I don't have a mental illness. So that was that. Um, Judge Bonifant, however, on July 31st, 2024, he now decided to put as my bond condition that I'll go and do see another psychiatrist on my own. I'd volunteer and go and see another psychiatrist. I didn't know that until, because, when they make you swear an oath in court, first of all, right? When he wants to order your release, he found me competent, and then you go down and then they give you a bond sheet. So you swear an oath to something you haven't seen, because he makes you swear an oath to a bond to conditions that he didn't give me ahead of time. So I'm just swearing an oath, right? And then I go down and I find, well, he's asking me to go and see us. He gave me a specific whatever hospital I should go to in order to see another psychiatrist to do another evaluation. That wasn't what it even seemed like. But in any event, he found me in violation, even though that wasn't the case, because, it's my right. I'd already called Maryland Department of Health, and wrongful involuntary commitment is actually a crime. And your mental health medical records, those are actually private. They're protected by HIPAA. Nobody can coerce you. It has to be something voluntary, right? You go on your own and you do your evaluation, or you refuse, or you see whoever you want to see. No one can coerce you. Now, the state of Maryland, however, their court system has a practice that so long as they've charged you with a crime, then the judge can coerce you to go and do an evaluation. So that's a pretext. But the judge lies in coercing you, because he has to have reasonable grounds. So Judge Bonifant has been lying that I have a mental illness when I don't. So he has to fill a record as a court order, right? But the hospital can only take somebody with a mental illness, or otherwise, or somebody who, if they don't have a mental illness, they have to come voluntarily. And that's a psychiatric hospital. They can't force them, otherwise it will be violating their constitutional rights. It's called a wrongful involuntary commitment, and it's even a crime. They can sue the hospital. The medical doctors who take them can be, they can lose their licenses, and they can be criminally prosecuted. But when a judge orders it, right, it's different. But the judge too can't just arbitrarily commit somebody who doesn't have a mental illness. So Judge Bonifant, and I saw the records, because they become part of my medical records. I saw when I got to the hospitals, they show me, because you have a right to ask for your medical records, right? That's HIPAA laws, and you have a right to make any corrections, anything false records. You can make corrections, because it's libel. In America, the First Amendment says, if you say somebody who doesn't have a mental illness has a mental illness, that's actually defamation, and they can sue you, right? So it's libel. You have a right to check all your medical records. Again, this doesn't constitute a legal advice. Let me just say that straight away. But you have a right to check your medical records, see any wrong information, and have it corrected. Otherwise, you can sue the hospital, and they can be criminally prosecuted as well. So I asked for my records. I saw everything. I saw where Judge Bonifant lied. He made straight up false statements saying I was manifesting symptoms that were not true. My roommate was there. My roommate, they were in court. For the record, the public defender said that I have no mental illness. So she didn't see anything, but Judge Bonifant falsified his records maliciously. He'd have to be delusional for him to see something that nobody else saw, right? That wasn't real because I brought witnesses who could back me up. And I'd been living, with my friends all this while. Nobody has seen anything. I lived with, in a house with 9 people, my friends. One of them was a medical doctor, right? Was actually in med school. They didn't see anything. My pastor, one of my pastors that talks to me regularly, wrote to the judge. Who was a professor of psychology. He's a psychologist. He wrote the judge. My aunt's a psychiatrist, right? One of the hospitals he actually sent me to, she's worked there. She's licensed to practice in the state of Maryland. So nobody has seen these things. Only James Bonifant and the false accusers, the falsification. So he falsified records, maliciously falsified records in order to obstruct justice, right? And so that impairs the fair administration of the courts. So Judge Bonifant then, on November 13, 2024, he found me in violation. He said I was disobeying his order to go and see the to go and speak with you know. So actually, what happened was he'd asked me to go and see. Um, that was what he put on the bond, that I should go and see, uh, uh, go to a certain hospital, right, and come back and give feedback on whatever they say. That violates my constitutional rights. I don't have to do that. He can decide to hold me in jail prior to trial. If he thinks I'm dangerous, he's allowed to do that. And this is something my attorney and we agreed on. I said, look, because it was costing me money. At that time he had barred me from working because he placed the GPS on me, and I had a job. They wanted to, they nice 6-figure job, and they were holding it, right? But now this guy just held me up and barred me from working. So uh, I couldn't work. So I had to be relying you know, on support. I don't take welfare, God forbid. And that's another trick that they do when they get you in the hospital. They have a social worker. They try and coerce you to lie that you have a mental illness, so that you'll be able to enjoy benefits like free rent and things like that. I said no, I don't, and they will be giving you money. So that's part of Judge Bonifant is part of healthcare fraud, and that's defrauding the United States government, because the U.S. federal government actually gives grants to the states, disburses grants to the states, right? In any event, Judge Bonifant now said he was going to send me uh, to jail and send a Dr. Julie Smith to evaluate me, right? To give me a competency evaluation. So that was going to be a second competency evaluation. That Dr. Julie Smith had actually filed a misconduct malpractice complaint against her. And that's ongoing because she had committed malpractice the first time. She was one who found me not competent to stand trial. So she, the first one that she did sometime in November, maybe November 5 or November 7th, one of those days, 2023, I requested that my mom be available. So my mom was available. My niece was available behind the scenes, but she showed up and said hi, and they were recording it. My mom had asked her that, hey, do you see any mental illness in this person? She said, Dr. Julie Smith said no. Now, instead of asking me questions for competency, right, because the questions that they ask you for these competency evaluations, she didn't ask me a single one. She was asking me about my history. I gave that, right? So they're just trying to do their own arbitrary, unwarranted evaluation on my psychiatric history. And my mom told him that no, she's never taken me to a psychiatrist before. I've never suffered from a mental illness, nothing. So this woman now falsifies her records, lying, just fabricating her records that maybe my mom was not being honest, and that because a mental illness is culturally looked down on. So her being xenophobic and racist. And my mom, my aunt, they let them know that no, that we're actually, we're that I was raised in a Western sort of way, and my parents as well. Both my parents are university educated. My mom's traveled to over 30 countries. My dad as well. My dad, in fact, lived in England at some point. Went to school in England. Was trained there. So come on, it was ridiculous what this racist Dr. Julie Smith wrote. She wrote something that was defamatory, even though she wrote that, but she wrote that I'm not dangerous and I don't meet the standard for psychiatric um, in hospital, hospital inpatient hospitalization. I think that's what they call it. Yeah. So the judge now wanted me to go on my own, but I wasn't going to volunteer. I wasn't going to do that. So um, a judge can, if you're unwilling to go on your own, a judge can commit you, but only for somebody who has a mental illness. He hasn't established it. And I was saying that, look, the initial process, right? Ab initio was fraudulent. You started off with something fraudulent from Jide and from whoever they created. It's fabricated evidence, and that violates my constitutional rights. In the law, anything that you're accused of, you have a right to dispute it, right? First of all, you have to be given notice and you have a right to dispute it. You have a right to an impartial judge. That has not been established. Maryland has a practice where they say, well, if they charge you with a crime, that's their practice. That means the judge has a right to, if he thinks you have a mental illness, he has a right to just commit you to a psychiatric hospital. That's not what the law says. Because if that were the case, the judge would write it down that he thinks I have a mental illness, so he's committing me. That's not what he does. When he signs off, making a court order and sending me wrongfully to a hospital where, uh, you know, where I'm unwilling to go. My family is unwilling, right? My family has contended that I must not go. That's why my mom, my family, they wrote the court a letter saying that, look, they don't, accept for me to be committed to any hospital, to go anywhere. And she said, don't do any evaluations. Any evaluations, she has to be present. And so those two hospitals he sent me to, she appeared. She appeared, at least they interviewed her, and those hospitals were good and all that stuff. And both of them said, no, I don't have a mental illness. They didn't recommend any medication. So this judge now was now playing dice with my life, looking for the quack doctors that are going to do the wrong thing, right? Fortunately, that wasn't the case. So Dr. Julie Smith now fabricates, this doctor's report. And then when I refused to go, they now conjured up somebody else to fabricate another report. That was somebody, because there's a process. If a judge, uh, in order to commit you into a hospital in Maryland, psychiatric hospital or mental health hospital, they require, I think, at least two, they need health professionals to do it. And it's your right under HIPAA. If you don't want to see a health professional, you don't have to see a health professional. But a judge can order you, but it's been arbitrary. And the judge, why he's been able to, his grounds would be that, well, this started from an emergency evaluation petition that somebody said so, and he kept saying for a year that it was my uncle, that it was my family who said I had a mental illness. It was my uncle, it was my family. That's what he kept saying, and it was a fabrication. So my mom went to court saying Jide Wire is not my uncle, everything he wrote was a lie. On So in fact, regarding that uncle thing, the last time when I was released from a hospital, the last time, this was on June the 25th, 2025. Um, One of my pastors that I've known now for over 20 years, he's a Chinese man. I'm not going to mention his name just for his privacy. He came and I stayed with him because he was in touch with me. He was the one who, he's been in touch with my mother. He was one who obtained the court documents from Nigeria from my mother and sent them to the court in Montgomery County, sent them to the court, sent them to my attorney, my public defender, right? So he was involved and he came to get me on the day they came and he had me stay with him. So I was staying with him and his wife. I was very grateful. His wife is a white American woman. The pastor, he's a Chinese American and, he's, we've known each other for over 20 years now and everything, so hey, so he appeared in court. He came, and when the judge was now talking to him and talking about my uncle, blah, blah. So uh, the pastor corrected him and said, no, that man's not my uncle. That he's been communicating with my mother, that the man's not my uncle, that my culture, we just call people, as a sign of respect, we call people. But the pastor told him that. Since that day, thank God, Judge Bonifant had not dared mention that fraud, right? So the court has been perpetrating this fraud on the court, right? That's Judge Bonifant himself has been perpetrating the fraud on the court when they used a man, an impersonator, intentionally, Jide Wari. Um, the police, the attorney he hired, Steve Mercer, knew because I told him, my family told him, so they were perpetrating that fraud on the court. I I told the judge, but anytime I tell the judge seems it makes it seem like willful blindness. That okay, I must be delusional. That okay, what I'm saying is inaccurate. But on this day, June 25, 2025, um, my pastor told the judge that no, that Jide Wire is not my uncle. Actually, he's been in communication with my mother. That he's not my uncle. The judge has never said that again. So that was June 25. And since June 25, he hasn't committed me again. And this time he wanted to try it again, but he kept saying, well, that the doctors have already said I don't have a mental illness. So he knows it's for the record. It will be wrongful involuntary commitment if he does it. But the thing is, it wasn't error, right? It was because, judges, they have this sort of judicial immunity for acts that they do and for errors so even when they retire, you can't sue them in a civil suit. But if it was knowingly malicious intentional fraud, that's fraud upon the court, they can be criminally prosecuted. And that's what I filed against him with the Department of Justice and Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And that's what I'm pursuing because he did it maliciously, intentionally, and fraudulently. So he falsified the record on December the 5th, 2024. So when on November 13, 2024, he ordered me to go, he said I was in violation of my bond condition. And so he said he was going to lock me up in jail for an inpatient, for a jail um, uh, psychological competency evaluation. That's what he calls it, right? So he asked that Dr. Julie Smith, who had already falsified an initial evaluation, which I have a malpractice complaint against her, and my family is going to sue her. I said we're suing her, right, for malpractice, right? So he now asks her to come and evaluate me again, which is, again, uh, that's a conflict of interest. That's somebody who I have a malpractice complaint against. Um, what is she going to say if she's evaluating me? It's just like if an underage girl who's been sexually assaulted by her psychiatrist, would the judge send her back to her psychiatrist who's accused that psychiatrist of sorry, would the judge send the underage girl back to the psychiatrist for an evaluation? The same psychiatrist that the underage girl has accused is sexually assaulting her. No, that's against that's arbitrary, right? That's not that's an injustice. That's odious. That's unreasonable because that psychiatrist going back to her violator, the predator, that person is now going to give a decision, an opinion that's going to discredit the young girls, make her seem that okay, now this person is crazy. So in order to protect herself, she's going to be trying to defend herself. That's almost like the principle of as I said, uh, nemo judex in causa sua, right? Being a judge in their own cause. Given that the judge will be giving the psychiatrist an opportunity to be a judge in their own cause because there's already a malpractice complaint against that person, right, for malpractice. So that's a that's a principle that actually violates ethics, right? So in any event, when I was now, locked up, when at the jail, at the holding place, my attorney came and spoke with me, the public defender, and she said, "Look, we already have under the law." This was what she told me. She said, "Under the law, we already have a report that's still current. It's not even yet 6 months, right? It's still fresh. That report says you are competent to stand trial. So you can refuse to do another one, right?" Because she had contended with the judge that, no, I'm already competent and I don't have a mental illness. This was what my attorney told the judge um, that was, her name is Desiree Hall, a black female. That's what he told the judge on November 13, 2024. She told the judge that, look, what's the purpose of these infinitum evaluations? I was just found competent. I don't have a mental illness that I just want to get on with my life. Let's go on with this trial. I want to get up with my life. That what's the purpose of doing another evaluation? I was just found competent to stand trial and I don't have a mental illness. There's no call for it, right? But the judge now started stating things that were arbitrary. It was, I don't know, he just started lying in court saying, oh, he sees me doing this, he sees me doing this, he sees me being delusional, he sees me manifesting my hypomania. He just started saying all these things. And maybe it's based on his racism. Maybe Judge Bonifant is so racist and xenophobic that when I pronounce things, my accent or my foreign way of speaking, maybe he hears something else. So maybe it's his racism or xenophobia and he hears something else. But the thing is, I think he just maliciously, intentionally fabricates facts. That's it. He falsifies information. So he said, okay, that, that Dr. Julie Smith, whom I already had a complaint against, should come and evaluate me. So my attorney said, when she comes, she came to talk to me down, in the holding. That when she comes, it's my right. They can't force me. I should just refuse to see her. Say I don't want to see her. They can't force me, and they have to use that evaluation they already have. So from Dr. Brandis. So the Julie Smith, she came. Was it November? She came maybe November 18 or whatever. Wanted to evaluate me. I said nope. I don't want to see her. So so even though I said I wasn't going to see her, she went and wrote a false report saying I was dangerous, violating uh, her professional ethics. You know, professional ethics, you just say, oh, this person refused to show up. But she can't make an assumption. She made an assumption that because I refused to see her, she now said, well, then I must be dangerous. When there's something that's recent, right? A doctor recently had just said, I have no mental illness because she had written a fraudulent report earlier, right? But this doctor, most recent Dr. Martin Brandis, where I was wrongfully committed, fortunately, those doctors said, no, I have no mental illness, and I was competent to stand trial. So Judge Bonifant now called for a review. So on November 5th, 2024, I showed up. The day before, the district public defender, his name is Sean Mukherjee, he had come to see me, right? My attorney, Desiree Hall, for some reason, she had quit. She left the public defender's office. So Sean Mukherjee showed up. I found out he's the head of the public defender's office in Maryland. He's the district head. So he came. He's an Indian guy, American guy, smart guy. He talked to me, right? And he was talking. We talked for about an hour. And then he said he was going to he wanted to ask me a few questions to test my competency. I should just answer those. So, I answered, he said, you're competent. So he's like, so he talked to me. He goes, and I remember the phrase he goes, he smiled. He said, it's a good thing. He doesn't think I'm batshit crazy. I'm competent. He's getting me out of here. He's going to get me to go home tomorrow. He said it confidently. So he asked me that I should give him some numbers, people that know me well, that he can call so they'll come and speak on my behalf in court. So he's like, he doesn't agree with what Julie Smith said, that I'm not competent, that the guy's trying to send me to a hospital. That's crazy. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm competent. He's going to get me released the next day. That's what the guy said, Sean Mukherjee. So I gave him numbers. I gave him two numbers. He wanted just one. He wanted just one. There's somebody I'll show off because these lawyers is public defender's office. So even though you see, I was showing how reasonable I was because it's impromptu. People are going to be busy, so I wanted to give him alternatives, different things, you know, um, options because it's just this, next day. People have schedules. They can't just get up and show up in court. Impromptu to just show up next day. So I planned and I called somebody else, a friend of mine. I anticipated, so I called several people, and this person said she'd show up, she'd take off work and show up, and so she did, and she called I gave her the attorney's number, and they communicated, and she showed up, and they examined her. She said, "No, there's nothing wrong with me," blah blah blah. And what was so now funny is, so the state attorney now examined me. The state attorney, the Zumwalt, right now said something bizarre. They gave her an opportunity to cross-examine my friend. My friend said, "No, I stayed with her for a month. There's nothing wrong. She never noticed anything. She's known me for a decade, and she's never known me known me to be anything but stable. That in fact, she wanted me to mentor her son. That she's we were close, that we've worked together. She's never seen anything. I lived with her." Because when I came out, I was very fortunate. One of those people who let me live. Can you imagine? I was living in her house, a female's home, after just coming out from from being wrongfully arrested, wrongfully put in a psychiatric hospital. But and she's a professional, right? Lives in a nice area, gated area, and she let me stay with her. I was a nice whatever, everything, and she came to court and said, "No, there's nothing wrong with me," and all that. And Thea Zumwalt, the assistant state attorney, now asked her stupid questions. Did you know he was eaten by his uncle? She said, she's heard, she's blah, blah, blah. She just, that's, she acted, answered well. Then she said, did you know that he blamed his ex-wife for the divorce? I'm like, how is that relevant to what we're doing? How is that relevant? Those are irrelevant questions. But in any event, the judge, Sean Mukherjee, talked extensively. He said, look, he talked to me for over an hour and everything. He didn't see anything wrong with me there. He sees I'm competent, that he doesn't agree with Dr. Julie Smith's evaluation, assessment. The woman did an assessment and evaluation, finding me incompetent, even though she never evaluated me. I refused to show up because the only time I'd ever spoken with her, my family was there, and she falsified that evaluation, saying she didn't find me competent to stand trial. And my mother had already filed a malpractice complaint against her. My mother as well was like, okay, we're going to sue her. That's no problem. And so this time she wanted to evaluate me again. I said, no, I refused to show up. But she filed something fraudulent. So even though the district public defender is arguing that no, there's nothing wrong with me, and I'm competent, that he's not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but he asked me all those things that he needs to know, and he finds me competent. But the judge was now arguing that he doesn't think that I'll be able. So there are three elements that are required, right? That you understand your charges, you understand courtroom proceedings, and you can work with your lawyer, right, to contribute to your defense. So the judge and the state were arguing that, okay, that they believe that I understand my charges, no court proceedings. And the attorney was telling the judge that, look, I'm legally trained, right? That he didn't see anything. So the judge was like, he has concerns I won't be able to work with my attorney. So, the judge, so my public defender said, that so far I've always been responsive. I've never missed a day of court. I've never, anything they've requested, I supplied it. That there's no evidence of that. That's in the future. That if that, ends up being the case, that fine. But that's not. You were saying that. Look, that's. There's no evidence of that, right? There's no evidence of that. So he now, you know, you know, he said that right, and besides that, I cooperated with him, that everything he requested, I supplied. He asked for for me to get somebody that could come and testify on my behalf, just short notice, just the day before, and I was able to do that. So there's no evidence, that shows that yes, I can work with my attorney. So eventually, eventually the judge still disagreed. The judge said no. He was just saying, "Oh, that's I have a mental illness," and then he said something about betrayal. He said, "In the tour, that America has a 200-year history. That that somebody with a mental illness cannot go through a trial, and so he's finding me incompetent, to stand trial, and committing me to Maryland Department of Health. So based on fraud, fabrication. I don't have a mental illness, so it was irrational, right? There was no medical diagnosis. There was no diagnosis that I had a mental illness. He just assumed, right? And he was so what he was saying was, I'm very rigid. My rigidity, it's a mental illness, which is which is crazy, right? So he committed me, so that was no problem. So um, meanwhile, I had a pending complaint that was active against him with the Maryland Commission on Judicial Disabilities. They were investigating him, and it was active and pending. So there was nobody that had evaluated me. So he now wrote false. He now wrote an order himself, falsifying that okay, that I manifested this, that I have this mental. He didn't say a diagnosis, but he just falsified stuff because the previous time nobody had written. The psychiatrist from the hospital he committed me to hadn't written, any diagnosis. So he himself, that's Judge James Bonifant now, falsified. Um, he just said I had a mental illness, but he falsified symptoms, wrote false symptoms that I never manifested. And my friends were in court. They saw, in fact, my friends, and it's on the jail phone calls that I had. My friend said, Judge James Bonifant is crazy. He's racist. He hates me and he's crazy. They said it, right? So he falsified records. So eventually they took me to another hospital. And when they take you to these hospitals, it's dangerous. But fortunately, there, you're entitled to see your records, right? And so I saw my records. I was just fortunate that these doctors, because they see me. So and from the hospital, you come to see that there are people who are delusional. So you see people who have a mental illness and you see it. And, these psychiatrists, they work with people who have a mental illness every day. Some of them lie. Some of them are really delusional. Like you see somebody telling you that they're a king and you believe. You see somebody tell you they're an actor. I saw them, they're delusional, and they're looking straight in your eyes. I'd never met people like that before. But this experience let me know that, well, there are people who are delusional, who tell lies, who are, and so I saw them. So they don't know you, but they just make an assessment, say, okay, are you dangerous or whatever. So I was fortunate that, the psychiatrists, because they see you at intake, but under the law, they're not supposed to take in somebody who doesn't want to come in voluntarily, who doesn't have a mental illness. They can't commit them. So the judge wrote a maliciously falsified record to send me there. A psychiatrist sees you at intake and they have to determine. The law says they can't because they can be sued and it's malpractice. They can, their license can be revoked. But so I hadn't seen their records, right? But fortunately for me, when the psychiatrist did the intake, there's a team, and I'm lucid. There's nothing wrong with me because this is the second time that he's doing it. The first time, those doctors were awesome. They were great, and they apologized to me. They didn't. They're like, they cleared me that no, this guy has no mental illness. So I realized, okay, just work with these people. So it was the second time. Just be calm, be cool. So even though they didn't recommend any diagnosis, any mental illness, so I didn't know though that Judge Bonifant had falsified the records, but under the law, you have a right to ask for your records and see it. So I asked for my records while I was there, close to the end, and I saw everything. So even though I was lucky that the psychiatrist did not provide me with any, she didn't provide me with any any medication. She didn't recommend any medication to treat me because if they recommended medication, they can force treat you. If you don't accept, then they can go and file an application with a judge. If you refuse it, and then the judge can order that they force you to take it, right? And they strap you up and they inject you. So she didn't recommend anything. So the same thing previously. So she didn't recommend anything, even though Judge Bonifant had falsified stuff. And she was one who showed me. So I didn't know after she got to know me, right? After a while, and then she told me, she said that like this judge, said that you demonstrated. She was asking me and she showed me because I got to see my whole records of my stay, everything. But she initially just showed me that Judge Bonifant had lied, had falsified the records. So I was like, okay, cool. And this is false. This is false. So first of all, they have to observe you to see, okay, if you're really manifesting the things the judge or whoever sent you there has lied that you're manifesting. So they see that you don't. So even so on the day I went in, they're checking. They do some tests, ask some questions, and they can tell. So these psychiatrists know their job. Many of them they're pretty good. So she didn't she didn't recommend any medication. She didn't recommend anything. And of course, I was cool throughout. So, and close to the end, when I was found competent, I checked my records. I saw, and I was correcting it. You have a right to have a false record corrected. So I did that. There's a place you can call, Maryland Department of Health. They'll order an investigation and they can have those records corrected. They'll investigate if they falsified the records, because that's actually illegal. It violates HIPAA laws. So it was Judge Bonifant, Judge James Bonifant had falsified records. So, but I also found something that on intake, the doctor, right, her name's Dr. Carmen Fulton, she also falsified the records, her record, because she has to sign off to commit me. And, you can't commit somebody who's not ill. So she signed off falsifying her record, lying as well, that, oh, I displayed these, she can ask later, she can lie later on and say, oh, that because Judge Bonifant lied. Those are the symptoms Judge Bonifant said he saw, so she had to be, she wanted to be able to check or whatever. Maybe sometimes some lies that they can say is that, well, it's there, but they're hiding it or whatever. And so they commit you. They'll lie that, okay, that yeah, they saw these symptoms. So it was a lie. So I already corrected it. I wrote, you can have that corrected. I wrote, and you contend, you disputed that, no, this is false. And when you show that, you call everything. And one of the bad things, though, is that the place where the doctor talks to you, the psychiatrist talks to you, the team, there's no camera there. So they should have cameras, because some of these doctors can be unethical. So I was very fortunate. At the end of the day, though, that hospital wrote again, he has no mental illness to a medical certainty. There's no medication. And he's competent. And, and they stated that, look, they're under the law, they can't hold me, right? If the judge doesn't want to release, the judge can send me to jail or release me in the community. That's because, the reason the judge sends you for a competency evaluation is that you are charged with a dangerous crime, with an assault crime, and that's what he uses, right? So in this case, the fabricated assault crime was that the police who assaulted me in my home, right, even sexually violating me because they removed me naked from my home, lied that I assaulted them, right? And we haven't had a trial. It's been 3 years. And so Judge Bonifant has been covering up for police misconduct, right? And maliciously falsifying records, to go into my medical records, to engineer a wrongful involuntary commitment to obstruct justice. So fortunately, though, again, the hospital said, no, I have no mental illness. And, and that was that. So this was 2 state psychiatric hospitals he'd sent me to, and there as well, both of them, they said no. So the state attorney, when I fired and I'm going to do another video, this video has gotten long. So that's how Judge Bonifant, in any event, the way he's been maliciously falsifying medical records. And if it was done to me, that I have a law degree and I have this sort of record, that I have my, impeccable record, I have the family that are psychiatrists. I have my aunt's a psychiatrist here in America. Wrote the judge, talked to the hospitals. I was lucky. The first one they went, talked to the hospital, talked to the attorney, said, no, I have no mental illness. My mom's been appearing. What about people who are so really indigent backgrounds? They don't have family, because, not having a family, not having people, it's America, right? It shouldn't be, it's not a crime. It shouldn't stigmatize somebody. It shouldn't deprive you of your rights. Whether you have a family or support or you don't, you still have liberties, constitutional rights that should be protected. And Judge James Bonifant is an odious judge that violates these constitutional rights and our liberties, our substantive due process. It's a violation of the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the laws and due process of law. He's been violating. And in terms of the courts, it's procedural due process. He's been coercing. There was also an instance where he coerces the the public defender's office, right? He coerces them to engage in attorney misconduct, right? And that's his concern, to get them uh, to coerce the defendant, to coerce me to accept an unfavorable plea deal, plea bargain, and I have the option, I have the right to refuse, to say no, that this is, this is, it's a violation of my constitutional rights because the charges against me are false, right? And they intended to actually obstruct justice. And, it doesn't, I'm not guilty and I'm not going to take a false plea bargain, a wrongful, an unfavorable plea deal just to help out the state attorney or the prosecutor. And so these are the corrupt practices that Judge James Bonifant of Montgomery County Circuit Court in Maryland has been superintending and perpetrating against defendants' rights, especially those who are minorities, Black people, Spanish people, and indigent people. And hopefully the FBI, the Department of Justice, I filed a complaint against him with the Department of Justice and the FBI and the Maryland Commission on Judicial Disability. So hopefully they take it seriously and prosecute Judge James Bonifant. He retires in just a month, but retirement shouldn't be the deal. He should be removed as a judge and be prosecuted, criminally prosecuted. He's a corrupt judge in Montgomery County, Maryland, and he violates he impairs the proper administration of the courts. He violates the constitutional rights of defendants, and he corrupts, America's legal system. He is an unethical judge by, knowingly, maliciously falsifying records to engineer a wrongful involuntary commitment like he did for me. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I'll keep you posted. Thank you.